Have you ever stopped to think about whether the language you speak actually changes how you see the world? I mean, not just the words you use, but the very thoughts you're even capable of having. Well, today we are diving deep into that incredible connection between our words, our culture, and, yeah, the actual architecture of our minds. So let's just get right to it with the big, mind-bending question. Does the language you speak literally control the way you think? And look, this isn't some sci-fi movie plot. It's a real, absolutely fascinating scientific debate that goes to the very core of what makes us human. To even start to tackle that question, we need to get our heads around the three main players in this whole story. You can think of them as our investigation tools: language, culture, and society. And the key thing to remember is that these aren't three separate boxes. They're all tangled up together, deeply and fundamentally. Okay, first up, language. It is so much more than just a bunch of words. It's this complex, symbolic system we use to communicate, well, everything. Our biggest ideas, our deepest feelings, our very identity. It's the main way culture gets passed from one person to the next and from one generation to the next. Then we have culture. A really great way to think about it is like the software of the mind. It's all the shared beliefs, the values, the customs that guide how a group of people lives, how they act, and how they understand their place in the world. And finally, there's society. So if culture is the software, then society is the hardware it runs on. It's the structured community, the people, the families, the governments, that provides the stage where our language and culture get acted out every single day. Now, culture itself is, as you can imagine, incredibly complex. So to really get its deep influence, we need a way to look inside. And that's where this brilliant model comes in handy. We're going to peel back the layers just like an onion. This is what's known as Geert Hofstede's onion model. See, on the very outside layer, you've got the most visible stuff, like symbols. As we go a layer deeper, we find the heroes a culture looks up to, and then the rituals they practice. But right there in the middle, the most important and totally invisible part, are the core values that drive everything else. Let's make this real with some Filipino examples, okay? A symbol? You can't get more iconic than the jeepney. A hero? Dr. Jose Rizal, who stands for intellect and sacrifice. A ritual? Could be the mono-po gesture, showing respect to elders. Now notice how all of these things, the jeepney, Rizal, the greeting, they all point to a deeper core value: collectivism, which is this idea that the group is more important than the individual. Okay, so now that we have a better handle on culture's hidden core, let's get back to our central mystery. There's actually a famous scientific theory that tackles this whole language and thought question head-on. It's called the Sapir-Whorf Hypothesis. Now, this hypothesis really comes in two flavors. The strong version, called linguistic determinism, basically says language controls your thoughts. Like, if you don't have a word for something, you literally cannot think about it. That idea has pretty much been dismissed. But the weaker version, linguistic relativity, now this one is widely accepted. It says language influences thought. A good way to think about it is language isn't a prison, but it is a filter. It just makes certain ways of thinking easier than others. And this has huge real-world consequences, from whether a marketing campaign works in another country to whether a peace talk succeeds or fails, based on really subtle word choices. Here's a wild example of this in action. The Purha tribe in Brazil doesn't have words for exact numbers, no 1, 2, or 3. And researchers found that because of this, they really struggle with tasks that require precise counting. It's not that they can't, it's that their linguistic toolkit doesn't make that kind of abstract thought easy to access. Or let's take an example that's a bit closer to home. In Filipino, the pronoun siya is gender neutral. It works for both he and she. This little feature of the grammar might subtly lead speakers to put less emphasis on a person's gender when just telling a story, compared to an English speaker who is forced to choose between he or she every single time. And what about words that are basically untranslatable? Utang na loob is a perfect case. You can't just say it's a debt of gratitude. It's so much deeper than that. It carries this powerful cultural value about social obligation, about a bond that can last a lifetime. The fact that this phrase even exists just goes to show you how language evolves to perfectly capture the core values of a culture. So it's clear the language itself really matters, but it doesn't even stop there. The specific way you use your language, your accent, the words you choose, the dialect you speak, it all comes together to create a unique social fingerprint that tells the world who you are and where you come from. Let's just break this down real quick. Language variation is the big umbrella term, like the differences between the Spanish spoken in Spain versus in Mexico. A dialect is more about a specific region, with its own grammar and vocabulary. Think about the Tagalog in Batangas versus Manila. And an accent is simply your unique way of pronouncing things. The really important part here is that these variations don't just change how you sound, they can actually influence how your ideas are perceived by other people, for better or worse. So with all this variety in the world, how do we even talk to each other across different groups? Well, that's where something called a lingua franca comes in. It's basically a bridge language. Here in the Philippines, both Filipino and English act as a lingua franca. And when you zoom out to a global scale, especially for things like business and science, English has really become that default bridge language. All right, we have covered a ton of ground. We've looked at language, we've peeled back the onion of culture, and we've explored the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. So, what's the final verdict on our big question? Here's the bottom line. Language does not build a prison around your mind. You can always learn new words, new concepts, new ways of thinking. But it absolutely gives you a default lens. It shapes what you tend to notice, how you organize the world into categories, and which ideas just feel more natural to you. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. If your native language is a kind of special lens for seeing reality, what unique things does it help you see clearly? And maybe, just maybe, the more important question is, what might it be hiding from your view?